Hello and welcome to this next video on mobile repairing. Many a times when we are using mobile phones, we may come across problems with respect to the battery. One of the problem is that your battery is not charging properly, or two is the battery is not working properly. Your mobile phone switches off very often. Now, these could be problems related to your battery or the connector that is transmitting the power from the battery to the PCB. The battery connector is also a critical component in every mobile phone, which ensures that there is an inflow of power into the battery and an outflow of power from the battery to the other components of the mobile phone. So, during the charging process, the battery connector is what connects the direct power supply to the battery, enabling it to get charged. And the connector is what connects the battery to the rest of the circuit in the mobile phone, enabling proper transfer of power to the different components of the mobile phone and enabling the mobile phone to work efficiently. You can see the battery connector placed here. We have seen that in earlier PCBs as well. And the battery is connected to 3 points on the mobile PCB. So, there are 3 tips where the battery connector is soldered on into a mobile phone PCB. If there is any problem in this particular connector, the battery will never get charged and neither will the battery be able to supply power efficiently to the remaining components of the mobile PCB. So, let us try and understand how we can remove this battery connector and replace the battery connector using a new battery connector. Now, in order to remove the battery connector component, we will need to use the SMD. The SMD is also called as the hot air gun. But before we remove the battery connector, you need to turn the board around and place it with the front side facing up. So, the display side is on top, and then we use the SMD to remove the battery connector. So, we have set the SMD at the right temperature now, and there is a steady flow of hot air coming out through the nozzle. Now, you focus the nozzle at the battery connector point, exactly where the connector is placed. Now, when hot air touches this particular aspect, the battery connector soldering will melt, enabling the battery connector to be easily removed from the PCB. Now, take the tweezer and try and hold the connector underneath so that it does not fall off. As you can see, the soldering that we have done on top is melted and we have removed the battery connector from the mobile PCB. Now, while you are removing the battery connector from the mobile PCB, please ensure that you do not disturb the alignment of any other component near the battery connector. It is important to hold or use a tweezer to hold only the battery connector component, so that you can easily pull it off from the mobile PCB. Now, let us turn it around and see where this is connected to the mobile PCB. So, we have turned the mobile PCB back again, and you can very clearly see where the battery connector was placed. The 3 points are visible here, and this is where the battery connector was soldered. So, let us hold the PCB on the stand and try and resolder it again in its original position. So, if there is a problem in the battery connector, you take this component off, you replace it with the new battery connector, align it with the 3 tips on the mobile PCB and resolder it again using the hot soldering iron. And take the soldering iron, melt a little bit of soldering wire, hold the battery connector from top, just as you can see it here. You need to hold it tightly and align the tips and solder these 3 tips. Be very careful while you are doing it, because your fingers might get hurt from the soldering iron if you are not careful about it. One of the important aspects that you must remember is to be very careful in ensuring that there is no short circuit or overlap of soldering points. Because the points are too close, sometimes it may overlap also. If it overlaps, please use the soldering iron to remove the connector again from its position. Take it out. You can use the hot air gun to take it out as well. Clean up those 3 points so that all the extra soldering that you see there is removed away. So, we clean up all the unwanted soldering from that place, giving us clear view of the 3 different tips where the battery connector needs to be done. Take a little bit of soldering lead and melted soldering lead and put it on top. You also place a little bit of soldering lead, melted soldering wire on the 3 connecting tips at the battery connector, and then solder them back in their original positions. Repeating it once again, ensure that you align the tips properly in its right position. There should be no overlap or any connection, any form of connection between these 3 tips, because that could result in a short circuit and can be very dangerous for your mobile phone. Ensure that your hands are steady while you are doing this, and hold it just as the way you are seeing it on the screen. Be very careful of your fingers and be steady while you are soldering them onto the PCB. Now, some of you may be wondering that we use the SMD to remove the battery connector first. However, in the second time, we were able to remove it just with the help of a soldering iron. So, some of you may be wondering where we need to use the SMD and where we need to use the soldering iron. Now, typically, soldering iron can be used where the soldering points are very clearly visible and you are able to reach the soldering point without any problem. Many a times, there might be minor components whose soldering points might be very, very minute, and if they are really minute, even your soldering iron cannot reach those points. It is also possible that some components, the soldering is underneath the component. For example, this is the case in many ICs. If that is the case, it is not possible to use a micro soldering iron to remove the soldering. In those cases, the SMD or the hot air gun is very, very effective and can melt out the solder without the use of a soldering iron. So, very clearly, as we have seen in this video, we were able to see how we could remove the battery connector and resolder it back again in its original position. Once you hold it back in its position, you can reassemble the phone and check whether the battery connector is working properly. You can plug the mobile phone into the main power supply and check whether the battery is charging. If the battery is charging properly, which means the connector is working properly. These connectors are easily available in the open market. Depending on the mobile device that you are using, you can pick up different types of battery connectors, because many mobile phones use different types of connectors. So, please be very clear on what mobile device you are repairing now, and therefore, place only the respective battery connector onto the mobile device. This work requires extreme care and does require a lot of practice before you can become an expert in this. One key aspect that you must remember is while you are soldering the battery connector, please ensure that you are not touching any of the other components placed on the mobile phone. There could be microphones, there could be mics, there could be other components which are nearby or next to the battery connector. Please ensure that you are paying proper attention to the right points and soldering it at the right position. We do hope this video would have helped you understand how we can remove a battery connector from a mobile phone PCB and replace it with a new battery connector in the PCB. Keep learning. Thank you very much.